Hello and welcome to our demo on type. I wanted to kind of make this to make sure that everybody's on the same page. We got some people in type. We got some people that are not in type right now. Some of this might be, yet again, a little bit of a rehash, but I'm going to try to get a little bit more into the weeds on a few things, hopefully clarify and build upon some stuff. So if you haven't yet, if you haven't taken notes over the lecture on type, at least the type basics, please do, or it's going to be a little confusing, this talk. But once we got that, let's crack open the demo and we're going to get working. So hopefully you have all the typefaces that I have in this demo. If not, we can make do. If anything's popping up, just go change it to that classic standard for Illustrator. But I'm going to be working off my first artboard here just for 1 second, just to kind of talk about a few things. I know we all probably knew about this stuff, but I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. So I think we kind of figure out if we have the type tool, which is that T, we click once, it's going to put in some dummy type, that Lori Epsilon, and we can go hold down Shift and scale that up. So if we click once, it's really good for making headers. If we use that type tool and we click and drag, it's going to fill it full of, placeholder font, placeholder type. Now, if I hold down Shift this time and I go and do it, it's going to change the size of that type box. This confuses people all the time. And so it's not scaling the text, it's changing the type box. If you notice there's a little red plus at the bottom, that means that I have additional type that's being cut out of that type box. So if I was making multiple columns, I could take the information from one column and have it feed into the next one by threading. We'll talk about that down the road. Or I'd have to make the column bigger like I just did. So just to kind of remember, if we're going to make something that's larger, we're going to click once and drag it bigger. If we're going to do a column of type, we're going to click and drag. Other things to kind of hit on while we're in here. If we're clicking on type, if we're moving stuff around, everything in Illustrator, I'm using the arrow keys. I'm clicking. And you've probably wondered why it jumps these weird, it's not like a smooth jump. It jumps like a tiny little bit. If you're in Photoshop, it's really smooth because it moves pixel by pixel. Illustrator and InDesign runs on points. It's more set up for type, where Photoshop's more set up for dealing with photography and illustration. So as I go and I click over one, it's moving over 1 point, a 72nd. So this sometimes is really annoying when you try to get stuff aligned. Just keep that in mind when you're using those up, down, over keys, that things are moving around a 72nd of an inch. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. Hopefully that clarifies a few things so we don't have questions. I'm going to go to Artboard 1. Let's demo. Okay, so what we're going to do in this first one is we can see below I have my tools used. I've created outlines and everything, which we'll get to down the road, but you can see that there's points down there. But anyways, let's go. And this first one, we're just going to be talking about setting type. We have a header at the top, line 1, line 2. We have some body type at the bottom. We're going to go adjust the typeface. We're going to go adjust some of the tracking and leading. Really basic stuff, but want to make sure everybody's on the same page with it. So let's go and click on that text box at the top where we can see that we have a really basic, that Myriad Pro selected. So we're going to change the typeface. There's a couple different ways of doing that at the top here. There's a flyout window that I would recommend using, which is the character panel. So we got that character panel there. I can go and find a different typeface. So let's do that. Let's change it from that standard default that's always in Illustrator and go pick something. I don't know. I'm going to use this antique olive black, but you might not have that. I think I downloaded it online, but I'm going to start off with that. So once we do that, we can see we've changed that. I know, super basic stuff. Why don't we keep our type size at 72, but we know we can go and adjust that size. Hopefully, I can go adjust it to 24. I can go adjust it by hitting the up down keys. but I'm going to keep it at 72. And then, even though it's at 72, let's go adjust that line spacing, because I goofed this up to begin with, and I made those overlap, so it would be annoying, so we'd have to go fix it. So we're going to go, we have this panel right up top, we have where we can select what typeface we're using. We can change whatever font style. This one that I got, because I got it off the internet, only has that one style, but we can make it bold, italic, so on and so forth. And then I have these first 4 boxes. We might use those, but the next ones we might not use, and we'll get to them here in just a second. So we got our type set at 72. Let's go check that line spacing out. So if I go to auto, it's going to go and bring it up to 86.4. And the reason why it does that for that line spacing, if I go 72 times 120%, it's 86.4. So like the default line spacing in Illustrator is 120%. And depending on the typeface that you have and the size that you have and the length of that line, that can really change wildly. Like right now, 120% makes this look like it's got a lot of breathing room. If I was going to be using this for, like, I don't know, the title of a chapter in a book, or maybe a handout. So depending on what you're using it for, 120% might be way too much. Some schools of thought say that you don't go below 120%, but there's no fast and hard or fast and loose rules for this. It's going to change depending on the typeface, the size of the typeface, the length of the line, etc. So let's do this. Let's go see if we can bring this down. I feel like this gap for me, it's readable, but I really don't like that gap. I feel like that makes the words feel very disconnected. Maybe because I have the word line twice and they're kind of stacked. But anyways, let's go. I'm just going to go and try a couple different things. So I know that 60 is way too tight, but if I do 72, that starts to feel a little bit better. We can go add or subtract by hitting those up-down keys. But I'm just going to go 72 for this typeface. I feel like that's not too terrible. Okay, let's go down to this bigger block of type and see if we can adjust that. So one thing to maybe always do when we have these big blocks of type is, we have the character flyout where you can do some settings in there. We'll talk more about those. But there's also a paragraph flyout. So if I click on paragraph, we can see that there's different ways of aligning things. We have different ways of indenting, which we can get to down the road. But there's also this hyphenation button. And for me, hyphens are a curse. They help if you're trying to set type and you're especially doing this kind of type like this where everything's justified. It's supposed to be equally spaced out. But the problem is it's really hard for a lot of people to read with hyphens, so I tend to get rid of those. Now, if you're using justified text, sometimes you need it. We'll get into more granular things about adjusting with hyphens down the road, working with justified text. Let's just kick that off for right now. So we got rid of our hyphens in the paragraph. We have a left align. And let's go do a few other adjustments. I don't want to use that classic Myriad Pro, so I'm going to go find something else. I'm going to use Public Sans. I don't know if you got this on your computer. Public Sans is kind of one of the typefaces used by Google often. And what I'm going to do is make some other adjustments from there. Okay, so I know that I'm got a lot of my placeholder type is not going to work because it's way too long, but let's go make some adjustments. So I like this type at 12 point. That seems nice, kind of standard. And this time, my line spacing is way too big, right? We could go try auto. That's going to go make it a lot closer, but maybe at this point, it's a little too close. I feel like if I was actually looking at this on a page, that it would be a little hard for my eye to jump from one line to the next. It's like just a little too close. So what I'm actually going to do too really quick is I'm going to go kind of break up these paragraphs, pretend that they're real type. But still, regardless, I feel like that's a little too tight for my eye. So let's go back to that character panel. And this time, I'm going to try to math it out one more time. So we got our type at 12 points. Let's see what it looks like if I went and did that 160%. So that'd be a 19.2, roughly that. A lot of times people say stick between that 120 and that 160%. I don't know, we'll try it out, see what it looks like. So let's go to 18, 19. And actually that doesn't look too terribly bad. It's got a little bit more breathing room. I might go bring it down to 18 for this typeface. If you don't have this typeface, you know, trying to make it work. But give it a little breathing room so it feels like maybe it's if we were in Word, it would be like 1.5 line spacing, just a little bit more. And let's do this. Let's go take our header and our body, and let's go to our alignment tools, either at the top or at the bottom right, kind of align them up. Bring that down just a tiny bit, kind of center it up like that so it looks nice and clean. So all we did was we went, changed the typefaces. We went and changed the line spacing a little bit. Let's do a few other things. I still feel like on my end, looking at this, that the type is still a little too tight, especially on that body down there, all that text that's going on down there. So I'm going to click on the character and let's go just a few other things. So we're not going to deal with kerning right now. That's the third drop down. But the fourth drop down is tracking. So let's go and bring a little bit more breathing room to that tracking. We can click that drop down and let's just bump it up like maybe by 10 to see how that feels. Okay, that seems like a little bit better. Just bringing that up a little bit. So we can adjust that tracking subtly, right? We don't want to track it way out because it's going to be really hard for somebody to read. So a little subtle adjustment might help out, especially with some smaller type on our eyes. So we've adjusted the tracking. We've adjusted the line spacing. There's some other adjustments we could do in this flyout window. You can adjust the length of that type, make it taller. Please don't. It looks really bad when you make type taller, unless you're doing something that's really artisanal, really artsy. I would stay away from that. It destroys the legibility of a typeface. Everybody's going to point it out and be like, you stretch that type. So don't stretch the type one way or another. There's those options there. Other things we could do is we could change the baseline, but unless we're needing that for a specific reason, we're not going to touch that guy either. There's another one that you're going to be tempted to use sometimes where we can go rotate the type. Maybe for some design where you want the type to be rotated, you could use this, but I've rarely used it. Other kind of features that we have in this flyout window before we jump to the next page is we can go make everything caps. We can have that little large cap, small cap thing going down. There's some different things like underlining, crossing out, things like that. And then if we really wanted to get into the weeds, but hopefully you're doing this in typography, we have some different things for snapping to glyphs. But if we have adjusted the type, we got the leading feeling better. We've got the typefaces kind of looking a little bit more cleaned up, not too tight, just that tracking. Let's finally go over to page 2. So we're going to hit on kerning, talk about this a little bit more. So we can see I have some almost kimming happening right here where that R is hitting that N and it's almost looking like an M. And I think if we've done kerning before, it's pretty easy to go and adjust. We can go click on it, go over to our character panel yet again, and there is that third little flyout or little drop down, my bad, that we can go and click on and we can adjust the kerning. So there's a couple different standard ways of doing it. It's not standard, but kind of built-in ways of doing kerning. There's an auto kerning, optical kerning, and metric. So we got that auto. I click on that. That almost fixes that issue completely. We can see what optical looks like. It's a little tighter in some ways. It's these have like subtle differences in how there's these different combinations of letters. So we can see that the K and the E might be sitting a little bit better with that optical because that's kind of built into that. There's metric. So we have those different versions, these kind of different kind of built-in settings. But let's do this. Let's try something that we can really get some practice kerning. I'm going to delete that word. Let's go make the word want. Okay, I'll make this nice and big. Write the word want. I'm still using a basic typeface, so we can see that's okay, but let's do this. Let's go find something funky. Somebody might have downloaded something on the internet. And a lot of times fonts that we find online have really bad built-in kerning. So here, I like this one. I'm guarantee you don't have it, but Windsor, it's a nice typeface for some things. But that kerning that is built into it is just busted. Like if we're looking at want right now, it's wa and then ant. There's like a huge gap between that W and that A. If we go up to that character settings, we can go try auto. It doesn't really do a whole lot. Optical helps a little bit, but it's still not great. So this is one of these where we're going to have to manually kern. And as we manually kern, you get more experience. You're going to be quicker at it. Okay, so what we're going to be doing in kerning is we're going to try always to get 3 letters at a time and try to figure out the spaces in between those 3 letters. So I usually do it 3 at a time. It helps me kind of visualize just a set block instead of worrying about if I have a really, have a 10-letter word. If I'm doing it in sections of 3, it just is a lot easier for me to visualize. So let's go through and see what we got here. Sometimes I like to highlight it so I can see it in reverse. So the spacing between our W and our A is pretty trash. It is really open compared to some of the other stuff. I'm going to go maybe back to auto. And let's do this. Before we go deal with that W and the A, I'm going to go adjust stuff between the other letters. My N and the T, that looks pretty good for me, but I feel like my A and my N, that's a little tight. So I can go click in between those. I think a lot of us have probably done this in type class. We can go do that drop down and we can give it a little bit extra. So you can go add a little bit or subtract a little bit. But let's go do it in between the W and that A. So I can click in between it. I can do the drop down. I can go to that kerning setting and I can adjust it numerically. And there's also a hotkey. A lot of people don't know about the hotkey. If you hold down Option or Alt, you click between that letter, you hold down Option or Alt, and you go right or left, it's going to move it over. This is really handy if you got, a header for a poster or some really big block of text. But what it's going to do is it's going to move it about 20 points at a time. Okay. So it's not great for like really, really tight fine tuning, but if you need to do some really quick stuff, there you go. Kind of taking a look, seeing I can maybe fine tune stuff a little bit more. But that's starting to look a lot better. The one worry is that I get too tight with that W and that A, but I'm going to stick with that for right now. So we have a couple options. We got that drop down that we can use, and we can go do it numerically, or we can go and use the hotkey. But just remember, the hotkey is probably good to do stuff quick, but maybe not the most accurately, because we're moving stuff at increments of 20, where when we're doing that drop down, we can do increments of 1. Okay, so we kern that up. Let's go over to this next one. We're going to be dealing with some basics of type to area and text warp. We might not use this on the next project, but we're going to build upon it. And as we continue down the semester, we're going to be doing more and more of this kind of setting columns of type, working on a magazine spread, stuff like that. So what I got going on here is I have this shape. It's got a text wrap. As you can see, as I move my shape around, it's starting to interact with the text. So let's go and let's just scrub over it all, delete it, and we'll start anew. I'm going to go grab my type. Maybe I'm going to go make a new column. I'm going to grab kind of a standard type. I feel like that. Windsor's kind of hard on the eyes. So I grabbed Public Sands. It's still at 12 point. I don't know. We're going to just try out something like that. So we have a column of text right here. So we have a couple different options of how we could go about engaging with columns of text. We could do something called an area to type, or type to area, and a text wrap. So right here we have a column. It is filled in. It's essentially just a box that is made, and the type fits in that box. We could change up that box. We could do a circle. So I'm going to make an ellipse tool, or ellipse really quickly. Grab that ellipse tool, drag it out. And if I hold down on the T, there is a area to type tool. So if I go click on the path of any shape, this could be an ellipse. I could make a shape. I could make a silhouette of Snoopy, Pikachu, whatever. And I can go and fill it full of type. So I click on the path. It starts to put some type in there. Let's go and do this. I'm going to justify it just so we can see a little bit better. Maybe I'm going to, you can see as I adjust it, it's going to sit in there differently. Wow, there's some really big gaps and rivers, but for the sake of time, there we go. So that's just being done by using that area to type tool. So you can have any shape and you can fill it with text, and with more time we could fine tune it so there wasn't as many gaps in that text. But sometimes you see this in magazines where they'll have like a certain kind of shape and they want the text to engage with that shape. I'm going to delete that. Let's make an ellipse one more time. And this time we're going to do the opposite of that, kind of. We're going to do a text wrap. So I have an ellipse here. I got some text. I want this ellipse, which let's say for the magazine that we're making, it's a photo. Okay. So if I go to Object, Text Wrap, Make, I can make what's considered a text wrap. There are some options we can go and adjust. We'll talk more about this as we're getting into more complicated designs, but I just wanted to show it's here, just in case you wanted to use it. So Object, Text Wrap, Make. You can see this little line pops up around the edge of that. We can adjust that line if we needed to. There's some settings. Right now my line is just 6 points. I could beef that up if I wanted to. Let's not for right now. And I can go bring it into this text. And as long as the shape is on top, it will go and mess with that type. It'll move over. Okay. If it's not on top, if it's on bottom, make sure we go to range, set that object on top, and it should go and push things in. So this is just an option. I don't know if anybody's going to use it for the next project. Just wanted to show it. We will use it down the road. Okay, so we did a type to area. We did a text warp. Text wrap, my bad. Very similar words. Let's go talk about another type tool that we have. So I'm going to delete this one. And yet again, let's go make another ellipse. So we have on our type tools, if we hold down that T again, you notice there's a lot more going on in here, but let's go to the next one down, which is type on a path. So this one's a little bit different. It kind of does a similar thing. And this time, instead of going and typing inside the shape, we're going to type along a path. So I went and clicked on the path. We can see that it's starting to loop around. Maybe I'm going to go and type in type test or test type. I'm going to go and make sure that instead of being, because my type right now is justified, I'm going to go centered. It's going to make life a little easier, I think. Boom. Okay. And then maybe I might adjust my ellipse too. So this tool is pretty cool because I can go and type along any path. I could do this ellipse like this. I could do a shape that I drew, like maybe I might go draw a hill real quick. And that type will run along that line. So it's really easy to go make a path and have the type follow it. So I'm going to click back on my circle. And let's do this. Let's go find another typeface. And let's go beef it up. I'm going to go about 36 points. Okay, so I got this type. It's looking okay, but it is definitely a little weird. It's off to the side. I could rotate things. Let's talk about this tool. So if we notice, we have the circle, we have the type along the circle, we have this line coming out of the center here, we have these two other lines on the other end. I'm going to click on the direct select. I tend to like that a little bit more. If you notice, if you get close to some of these lines, let's go to the two over here where there's a start and stop, we can see that there's a little arrow that pops up. So we can go find out a start and we can just drag it around. If you don't, this is kind of a pain at first. If you don't get it right at first, you're going to notice that it's going to want to clip things in weird ways. Sometimes there's like this big block of text that pops up and it wants you to go and thread stuff. But if you do it correctly, life is good and you should be able to move it around. So I went and I kind of centered stuff so we have a stop mark on one side, a start mark on the other side. My type is upside down, so I'm just going to go rotate that 80 degrees or 180 degrees, and it's up there at the top. Now there's another line. I'm going to grab my direct select again, and it says up down arrow, and I can go grab that. I can pull in, it can flip it upside down, it could flip it all the way down there again, it could flip it like that. So there's that possibility. So let's do this. Let's go flip it like so. Ooh. Takes a little getting used to. But you see this a lot of times. You see this, maybe we have like a circular logo. We have type that goes all the way around it. I'm going to go select my type. Maybe I'm going to go and adjust the tracking just a little bit because it looks really, really tight. So give it a little breathing room. We could go, if we wanted to, and current it out, but just for the sake of time, we got that type inside there. But just think about the uses of this tool. If we had a shape and maybe we wanted to duplicate the type, it could go, say test type and go around in a circle. Very easy to kind of work with. But it's just getting a hang of using those different handles. And you're going to know if you don't click on them, it's going to want to do other funkier things. But there we have the type on a path tool. Hopefully that's working well for you. You might use it on the project, you might not. But let's talk about a few other tools that are type related. So if we go to Artboard 5, we got dance. It's been moved around. How did we do this? It's pretty easy. So this is actually still type. What I'm going to show here is a pretty somewhat new tool. It's only been around for a couple years now. But let's go do this. Let's go and grab our T for type, and let's go write the word dance out. If you want to pick a fun typeface, go for it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this typeface and I'm going to kind of make it feel like it's a little bit more energetic. There's a couple different ways of going about it. But if we hold down the T, we can see that we've talked about the type tool, the area type tool, the type on path. There's some other ones that you may or may not use as a vertical type. I would really highly suggest you not doing type that goes vertical because a lot of times it's hard to read. There's a vertical area type tool. There's a vertical type on a path. We're going to skip all those. If we go down to the very bottom, there's the touch to type tool. Now this one's a little bit newer. It's used for touch screens. but I can go click on just a letter, and you can see that there's a box that pops up around that letter. I can go at the top little dot, I can rotate that type. If I go to the sides, I can go and slightly go and adjust the scale. So this one's pretty easy to kind of move around, kind of be a little bit more fluid with it, adjusting kind of the tracking, adjusting the kerning, kind of does that a little bit auto-wise, making sure that we're not scrunching our type, that we're still holding down shift, but maybe we go and we're scaling it in proportion. So we can just do this real quick. If we notice these different feet do different things, there's the one that locks, there's one that goes up and down, but we don't want to go and stretch it like that. We always want to stretch it proportionally. Then we can go and adjust, making this be a little bit more energetic. Kind of curring through it a little bit if possible. Something like that. Ta-da. There's other ways of going about this. We'll talk about that down the road. But this is a kind of a helpful tool. It's a little bit new. If you're using a touch screen, people tend to like to use it with a touch screen. Okay, so let's go to our last one. We're going to go to Artboard 6. We're going to grab our classic type tool. The hotkey is T. And I'm going to write the word cut on here. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to go and create outlines. So this is something that we need to do at the end of working on a document type. Always. We create outlines for several different reasons. One, so that we could switch the text from text to shapes, and we could edit those and clean them up if we needed to. Another one is that there's a lot of typefaces that are out there, and you probably don't have them installed on your computer, and I don't have them installed on my computer. So if you send me a document that has a typeface that I don't have, I'm not going to be able to see what that design looks like with that typeface. It's just going to come up with the standard Myriad Pro typeface. It's going to be highlighted in red. So what we can do to get around that is we create outlines. So I got a typeface here. You probably don't have it, but pick any typeface for cut. And let's go create outlines. So we need to make sure that we do this after we've proofread everything, that we know that we don't want to go and type any more in it because we've made it into actual shapes, right? You've probably taken type class. You've probably heard to go create outlines before. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. But let's go throughout all of our different pages and go select the type that we used and create outlines. I already did this to the type at the bottom. It's in a kind of bootlegged Helvetica typeface. So I already did that once. You don't have to do it there, but if you could go do it for everything else, because if you picked a funky typeface that I don't have, I won't be able to go and adjust it. I won't be able to see it. So I created outlines for everything, but let's go back to our cut page. So now that we got this, it is now no longer type. We can't use the type tool on it. There's points that I can go and edit. So if I wanted to make my own custom typeface, I could go do that, or if I wanted to go stretch things in certain ways. But let's do this just for funs. We're going to go select our type here, and we're going to go cut the word cut in half. So if you go over to the eraser tool, it's like a block with a little nub on it. It's right under the paintbrush tool. You hold that down, there is a knife tool. So grab that knife tool. And if I have the text selected, I can go and slice right through the cut. And you can see that there was a line made because it's the shape. And if I grab my direct select, go click off to the edge so we're not selecting anything, I can go click on these shapes and I can go chop up cut. Pretty simple. So just remember that after you get done, before you go to print, before you go to submit something to somebody, when it's done and you no longer want to edit that as type, that we can go and create outlines. It's really kind of important to do that. You know, the type tool, the type touch tool that I used on Dance, you could just create outlines and then go and just start moving things around. That's what a lot of people used to do. Some people like that type to touch tool because you can still go edit something if you spelled it wrong. But remember, whenever we're going and we're about to go print, let's create outlines, and then hopefully it prints. Hopefully I see it when you submit it. Okay, folks. So the thing we need to do next is save this as a PDF and go upload it on Canvas. Congrats, you survived the first type demo. Peace.